Dead Space 2 is the sequel to the highly praised original. It's a science fiction survival horror game set in space developed by the now gone Visceral Game Studio. The Dead Space franchise is beloved by many, and I believe we can all agree that EA killing this series was one of the biggest tragedies of the last decade regarding the video game industry. The plot is about following the journey of Isaac Clarke, a previously inexperienced engineer and the last survivor of the USG Ishimura. He now adventures into the enormous necromorph-infested Titan station, making this Isaac's second outbreak. He now suffers psychological damage due to the events of the first game, and Isaac must reach the marker and stop once again this living hell. One of the things that many people praise in the original Dead Space is that Isaac as the player was inexperienced, and making him a silent protagonist made it more relatable because the player was experiencing the aftermath of the outbreak alongside him. In Dead Space 2, Isaac has already experienced knowing that it is better to shoot off the limbs, various techniques to conserve resources, and many other tips to survive, including knowledge of the enemies. That is, in my opinion, what makes this game great. Well, one of the many characteristics that makes this game great. He knows, you know, so it doesn't treat you like you're inexperienced if you played the first one, but if you haven't, it still gives you enough tips. Dead Space 2 has a great story. The goal of reaching the marker and not only putting a stop to it, but also finding out if Isaac can be cured in some way is a fair reason. He's never praised as a hero per se, but people acknowledge that he is a survivor. For example, Ellie doesn't have to treat him any different because she doesn't know that he was on the Ishimura, and one of the reasons he was there to begin with was because of personal affairs, not trying to save the world. Now he doesn't have anything going on in particular in his life, but what else is he gonna do but to continue fighting, right? I think that helps us empathize a second time with him. The story is fairly simple, but like any, it has interesting detours. One of my personal favorites was the fact that the player has to revisit the Ishimura at some point, and to me it's just like bringing this concept of like reliving that hell that he already went through.
Well, good. They're swarming in through a hole in the medical deck. At least you won't have to go through there.
Unexpected obstruction ahead. Shutting down. Welcome to the medical deck.
Crap.
Ellie and Strauss are good supporting characters, but it never feels like you have a team of experts per se. This is Isaac's journey. Need to fix or clear something? Well, you gotta do it, cowboy. The game maintains this feeling of isolation and hopelessness, but also Titan Station has notes and environmental storytelling to support the narrative. And as you traverse the station, you can find out more about the people who used to live there, the government, and other religious organizations, and see the station in such a terrible state is an experience that very few games can pull off. Games like Bioshock or Fallout, where someone goes to an essentially post-apocalypse-like journey and picks up the pieces of the story along the way. Speaking of Isaac is now a fully voiced character, and I really like him. He's an outstanding protagonist in my eyes. It's well written, his motivations are always aligned with his beliefs.
Ellie, I need him to be not dead. I need him.
Shit. Okay, Isaac.
And he's vulnerable. You can clearly see the events of the first Dead Space left a huge impact on him. You add that he suffers from hallucinations, violent behavior, extreme paranoia, and other schizophrenic-like symptoms due to the marker's influence, and you have a heavily traumatized but brave and strong survivor. And the thing about Dead Space 2's story is that there is both psychological and physical conflict that prevents Isaac and the players from reaching the end goal. It may be a simple concept or a simple characteristics, but here is so well executed. And I quickly want to put emphasis on the difficult task that might have been writing a character that previously had not a lot of writing involved. Instead, that focus was put on the world. Dead Space 2 puts slightly more focus into its main characters, and I believe it was a good choice. The game keeps it brief with a small cast of relevant characters like Isaac, his girlfriend or mind, technically speaking, Strauss, and Ellie. And while the antagonists are present, the story mainly centers on this trio. Isaac is a traumatized but deeply determined person, like I previously mentioned, and I think that's one of the most admirable aspects of his character. He's not necessarily unlikable, he's someone we can feel empathy for. I feel like this game has a very stoic narrative, and the hope only exists if the player believes in it. Is it scary? Maybe now it has aged a bit, but I still firmly believe that it is a scary title. Dead Space makes use of its world and assets to build up fear, anxiety, tension, and even frustration, and a sense of asphyxiation. Tight dark corridors, loud and weird noises coming from strange places, constant bloodstains, and a general feeling of unease, making walking through the corridors such a unique gameplay experience. The thought of constantly not knowing where an enemy might come from makes the player traverse the station in fear. The pacing is on point, never too slow, never too fast, and when it is, it has a good reason. There is always this sense of urgency in specific situations, and this sense of relaxation at others, but rarely of safety. The game is like a roller coaster. One moment everything is explosive and energetic and violent and in a sufficient amount. Other times it is slow and terrifying. Sometimes you have to fight bigger hordes or horrifically deformed and equally disgusting enemies, and others just a handful. But that handful never feels like a handful. That handful might be more haunting than a bigger horde, or might left a bigger impact on the player. The narrative piggybacks from the way the players interact with the world. It never feels restraining, and you have a strong feeling of autonomy while playing. Isaac's health is visible on his rig. In the back, the inventory physically exists in the world, and in order for the flashlight to work, you have to aim. While aiming, your weapon displays a laser sight indicating where the projectile will land, and only while you aim, the flashlight and the laser sight will be active. The weapons have idle stages and full combat stages, for lack of better words, when you're aiming down sights and for when you're not. The movement and combat feels intuitive, natural, and equally challenging. Como que sale un poquito como robot, ¿no? No sé. The guns are a mix of tools for mining and working, as well as military-grade weapons. Same with the suits, and the way you obtain objects by finding them on the world is great. The store is purposely well lit, and it psychologically attracts the players, and sometimes the game takes advantage of this to apply a scare. You have currency and notes. Notes are used to upgrade your suit, weapons, or open up doors for valuable resources, so it is a tactical choice when playing. Also, the suits have various stats and are used for different playstyles. And speaking of playstyles, there are many ways to play this game. Strong tactics carry on from the previous entry, like shooting off limbs and using thrown objects to conserve ammo are always present, but every room feels like a tiny puzzle that the player can resolve in a way that they see fit. The enemies behave differently, and they are threatening and extremely aggressive. When the player stomps and punches, it is occasionally out of panic and desperation, and Isaac's behavior and voice acting reflect that. And what I mean is that the player's behavior and intentions perfectly translate into Isaac's. A little detail that I absolutely freaking adore is the light of the oddly shaped visors. That light is always shining, and about that aesthetic, the suits are one of a kind to me. They're all extremely well designed and mesmerizing to look at, in my humble opinion. The security suit has got to be one of the best armors I have personally seen on games. Higher difficulties are unforgiving, and it is a worthy challenge for the experienced players. The game constantly forces you to adapt and improvise and encourages you to not remain in monotony. The game makes use of its strongest feature, its ambience. Titan Station feels cold, dangerous, lonely, mysterious, apocalyptic, industrial, futuristic, and much like the USG Ishimura, It is brilliantly used to create not only fear in players but also many other feelings associated with the fact that something is unknown: panic, anxiety, stress. Dead Space 2 has an extra ace. Isaac's mental health or mental state is not always stable, which makes us players be wrapped in an extra layer of paranoia. The station utilizes light in its favor as well as sound. The sound design is marvelous, and many of the strange noises you hear play into the experience, as you may not even know what it is even causing them in the first place. All you know is that it is probably trouble. I hope I was able to properly express my feelings towards this game, and while I don't play it very often, it is one that will constantly live in my good memories. Sometimes I remember specific levels or sequences and feels like somehow I played it recently. And very briefly, I even remember my first experience with Dead Space 2. I was 11, the game had just come out. I begged my mother to take me to the mall, and she did, and we got the game. And I remember the store was like wrapped in memorabilia or things to promote the game, like physical goods. There were posters, there was like a plastic helmet, and I remember there were even black and blue balloons. When I played it, I was so scared and frustrated because I had found the game to be quite difficult for my age. My mother was very mad at me, and she asked me to either give it back or sell it or do something with it, but I just couldn't keep it. But I lied, I kept it, and a year later I finally finished the game. I had a lot of struggles and I was super scared, but I finished the game, and it just, I don't know, I still have that copy. You're gonna see it on the screen somewhere, but I don't know, it just like has a very special place in my heart. Dead Space 2 sits at a strange place. The first game is regarded as one of the best survival horrors ever, even one of the best games ever made. And many fans think Dead Space 2 kinda ruined that by adding more action sequences and by giving Isaac a voice of his own. And Dead Space 3 is so controversial that it is ridiculous. People don't even consider it a survival horror, and it honestly feels more like an action game with horror elements. And it was clearly inspired by the epidemic of shooters at the time, and by corpos who just wanted to squeeze as much money as possible for the franchise. I honestly have learned to move on and let these games go, because I honestly doubt that we're gonna get more titles in the future, or maybe EA is gonna do something with it, I don't know. But at any rate, thank you so much for watching my videos. I can't wait to read your comments. Feel free to leave a comment about your favorite Dead Space title, your favorite moment, anything you want to tell me. I'll be reading them in the comment section. And also feel free to check out my other videos and my Patreon if you feel like supporting my work. If not, that's fine. And thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have an awesome day. O no, ¿verdad? Pues también, pues si no quieren tener un día chido, pues tampoco se puede hacer nada, supongo. Play Dead Space 2. If you haven't, it's a great title.